us for today's Strengthening Families Networking webinar for the month of March 2019. Today we're going to be talking about shaping a new strategic plan for strengthening families, which I'm excited about. I hope a lot of you are too. So let's get us going. For today's agenda, first I'll be sharing updates from the Center for the Study of Social Policy. Then we'll hear from Lucretia Rose with updates from the National Alliance of Children's Trust and Prevention Fund. And then we'll get into our topic of the day, the Strengthening Family Strategic Plan, and I hope that we'll have lots of conversation and back and forth, whether you're typing or raising your hand to be unmuted so that you can speak. I hope that you'll have lots to say about the draft that we're going to share, and that you'll be able to see your imprint on the next version of it. So I'll start with a few updates from CSSP. Just so everyone knows what these webinars are all about, we do this every month on the second Thursday. It's an open invitation to anyone who's using the Protective Factors Framework or coordinating Strengthening Families efforts. And excuse me, we convene these jointly between my organization, CSSP, and the National Alliance of Children's Trust and Prevention Fund. Each month we have a different topic, often with a guest speaker. We coordinate those between CSSP, the Alliance, and sometimes with a volunteer from the network who wants to coordinate a particular topic. So always contact me if there's a topic you'd like to see covered or a topic you'd like to present on, and we can organize that. The recordings and materials from all of these webinars for the past many years are posted on a Google site maintained by the Alliance. You can see the links there, and it's also always in the follow-up email that you get, and in the newsletter. The Strengthening Families newsletter comes out saying, in case you missed it, here's the link to last month's webinar. So there's a lot of rich resources there if you're ever wanting to scroll through or search for particular topics we may have covered in the past. We've had great speakers and great resources shared. So as I said, we do this the second Thursday of each month at this time. In April, we'll meet on the 11th with a focus on the new Parent Engagement and Leadership Assessment tool. I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a minute. And you can register for the webinar already, but again, you'll get a newsletter with the registration link, and you can find it on CSSP's social media and website, and on that Google site maintained by the Alliance. There's lots of ways to find the upcoming webinar and to get registered for it. Then we'll announce the topics for May and June as they come up, but you might want to mark the dates on your calendar now in case it is a topic that you want to participate in. All right, so I mentioned the next webinar will focus on this new Parent Engagement and Leadership tool, that's our assessment tool. This is part of a whole set of tools that we're putting out shortly that focus on the value of building a local early childhood system. And so we really focus on 4 different ways that we believe children and families and communities are better off when there's an early childhood system as opposed to just good programs. Good programs can do a lot on their own, but they are much stronger and can have a greater effect when they're networked together into a system. So we talk about that affecting the reach of the system, that young children and families get the services and supports they need, the coordination between the sectors and services within that system, the commitment of the community to early childhood issues, and in equity. And within the equity category, we include both racial and social and economic equity, but also parent engagement, because we think that's key to how systems promote equity, is that all parents have the opportunity to be engaged as partners. So we have a toolkit that covers all of these topics that's coming out soon. We did a webinar at the end of February, which many of you participated in, and I appreciated the interest in it. Unfortunately, we've had some design snags and haven't been able to get the full toolkit up on the website yet. So stay tuned. You will get an email if you participated in that webinar when the materials are posted. And if you're on any of our mailing lists, you will be hearing about this when it comes out. We're very excited about it and apologize for the delay. And as I said, on April 11th, we'll focus in on the Parent Engagement and Leadership Assessment tool. That's a part of that. We'll be talking about, well, we'll hear from parents and professionals who work together to develop the tool, and those who have been piloting the tool, particularly in Boston, where there's a big pilot going on right now. And then we'll talk about how it connects to your Strengthening Families work and how it relates to the existing Strengthening Families program self-assessments, because we know there may be some confusion in the field, but I think this is a really nice addition to the tools that are available for you to use. So register for that. Look for the newsletter about it. And yeah, I hope you'll all be able to get some use, if not out of the parent engagement and leadership assessment tool, then out of some of the other tools that are coming out in that toolkit. Right as we speak, there is another webinar going on that many of you might have been interested in about the Parent, Family, and Community Engagement Framework and how it's being implemented at the early childhood systems level. So maybe you divided and conquered with a colleague and someone else was listening to that one while you listen to this one. But I just wanted to make sure that folks knew it was available. And the recording should be available on the website that's listed here. If you just look up the Parent, Family, and Community Engagement Framework, their list of webinars will come up. And I encourage you to check that out. CSSP is one of the partners in the National Center on Parent, Family, and Community Engagement, and we're excited about the webinars that are coming out to help people figure out how to implement that. Another webinar coming up is next week. I'm actually presenting on this one. It's called a Digital Dialogue as a pre-conference offering for the National Conference on Child Abuse and Neglect. And it's called Are the Words Toxic Stress Toxic? Rethinking the Narrative About Early Life Stress. So I think we're all on board with the concern about toxic stress and the adversity and trauma that many children are facing. But I'm positing that the narrative has gotten a little past where we would want it to go, and we're sometimes making broad statements using the phrase toxic stress that may actually be harmful to some of the communities that we want to help and some of the children and families and youth that we want to help. So join that webinar, join the conversation, let me know if you agree or if you disagree, and we'll be talking about all the different ways that people are doing messaging and communications around toxic stress and some of the pitfalls and what we want, how we can actually convey what we want to convey with that. So please join us for that. The registration link itself is ridiculously long, so what you see on the slide is just a link to Kent Hasby's Facebook page. That's the Child Abuse and Neglect Technical Assistance and Strategic Dissemination Center, which hosts these digital dialogues, and you can find the link on their Facebook page or their website as well. All right, I'm going to hand off to my colleague and friend, Lucretia Rose, who's a co-chair of the Alliance's National Parent Partnership Council, and she's going to share updates from the Alliance.
Thank you, Kaylin, and thank you for having me on the call today to give the Alliance updates. So the first thing that I would like to touch base on, it's on the next slide, is the scheduled training of trainers events that's coming up. So if from April 9th to the 11th, if you're in the San Diego, California area, there are only 5 open slots remaining in that training, and you'll see the registration link posted above, and we can put that in the chat box for you too if you'd like to register for that. The week of May 6th through the 8th, if you're in the Sacramento, California area, they'll be having a training there, and then tentatively scheduled for the week of June 24th. We don't know the exact date yet in the Sacramento, California area. Again, there'll be a bilingual training of trainers, and that's pretty exciting that we can offer that. If you have any questions or you would like to be added to a waiting list for more upcoming trainings, you can contact Martha Reeder at martha.reeder@ctfalliance.org. I'm really excited to share with you about the next slide. On the Alliance's website, we have a new page, and if you visit the website, there'll be a Partnering with Parents tab, and if you click on that, there then is a box that says the Parent Voice, and when you click on the Parent Voice tab, it brings up the screen that you see before you. This page was specifically designed to share emerging materials and information that have been developed by all the Alliance parent groups, both individually and together, and its intentions are to lift up the parent voice. It currently has materials that we worked on for Parent Leadership Month, such as certificates that you can download that are shareable to recognize parent leaders, and a few memes that we use during Parent Leadership Month to talk about partnering with parents and why that's important. Although those were developed for February, we encourage you to use them throughout the year to lift up parent voice. Another thing that you will find on the Parent Voice page are our latest tools that we developed. And the Alliance National Parent Partnership Council conducted an environmental scan because we wanted to know how people were partnering with parents across the country. So we used the top 10 questions and featured them in the question mark page there that you see before you, and with some answers. And then the flip side of that conversation tool is a conversation tool where parents and organizations can discuss where they are in their journey of building parent partnerships and building and sustaining those partnerships. So it's a really nice way to get people engaged in talk about parent partnership, no matter where you are on that map or what puzzle piece you might be on. And if you are interested in doing this with your organization, then I would encourage you to read deeper or dig deeper into the Building and Sustaining Effective Partnerships paper that's featured on the next slide. This is a wonderful conversation, or a wonderful piece of work that digs deeper into a discussion about, well, the discussion was developed around this paper itself. And it's a great way to prepare for the discussion because it's grounded in the four main concepts that you've seen featured on the exclamation mark side of the tool. And if you have any questions or are interested in using this or digging deeper or need to reflect on anything, you can visit the Alliance's website on the Parent Partnership tab, or you're more than welcome to contact myself at the email there is listed above, or Martha Reeder at ctfalliance.org. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucretia. Great new resources from the Alliance Parent Partnership Council. Okay, we're going to jump in to our main topic for the day, which is about developing this new strategic plan. And some of you have heard me talk about this for a while, so it's very exciting that it's coming to fruition now. And this is a process, of course. So our goal, I'll share a little bit about it before we get into this draft itself. How we're developing this. Our goal is to develop a collective Strengthening Family strategic plan. So it's not just a plan for CSSP, but for us and our partners at the national, state, and local level. So it's in sort of a collective impact spirit of saying we're all working towards the same goals and outcomes, and we all have parts we can contribute to that. So in order for that to be truly reflective of, you know, the many stakeholders out in the field, we are co-creating the plan with a lot of input. In fall 2017, which feels a long time ago now, but it's just over a year ago, we did a survey about current implementation and future directions. Many of you may have responded to that at the time. We had over 300 people respond, talking about sort of what they're currently doing with strengthening families, what they would like to do with strengthening families, where they think, you know, new sectors that where people would benefit from learning about protective factors, problems that children and families are facing in their communities that they think a protective factors approach could help to solve. All of those questions really helped shape our thinking. The answers to those questions actually helped to shape our thinking as we started to think about the strategic plan. We did a parent focus group in Washington, D.C. This winter asking the similar questions. It's sort of, where do you think this should go? Who needs to hear this? What kind of challenges do families have that we could use a protective factors approach to help them overcome? And then we held a Strengthening Families Champions meeting that was on February 1st of this year. We called it that because we knew we wouldn't be able to invite everyone who would want to have a say in this, because we had 200 people register for this webinar. Clearly there's really broad interest. But we wanted to get a group of people in the room who have been champions for strengthening families, either within their own organizations or their own fields or their own states and jurisdictions, so that we could, you know, have a sampling of the different types of champions that are out there who really believe in this framework and want to see it move forward. So I'll talk more about that meeting. And then with the results of that meeting, we've got a draft now, and we'll be getting feedback from the field starting today. So I'll talk a little bit about that strategic planning meeting that we had with what we call the champions. That included CSSP leadership and staff, including Judy Langford, who was the original designer of Strengthening Families, Nilofer Hassan, who's no longer on staff at CSSP, but who came to this meeting because she was also the original developer of the initiative, she and Judy. So it was great to have them both in the room. We had 5 of our national partner organizations represented. We had 3 of our federal partners represented. 3 of our state leads were there, who are also all involved with the National Alliance of Children's Trust and Prevention Funds to bring that voice in. We had 3 local implementers who either in prevention or intervention child welfare side are doing a lot of work at the local level to infuse a protective factors approach. 1 parent leader advocate, and then a few others who have been part of this story from the beginning, who have built protective factors into different models, developed tools, that kind of investment in the framework. Since I know a lot of you would have loved to have been there, we would have loved to have you there. I wanted to share the sort of process that we went through. There's a few pictures on the side there that show some of the work that was going on. We started out by sharing bright spots of current Strengthening Families implementation, and that could have taken a day easily just to talk about and ask questions about the innovative and exciting work that folks are doing around the country. We didn't have enough time to spend on that, but we shared some of the bright spots because that helps to inform where we think the initiative should go in the future. Then we talked about a future where all families have opportunities to build their protective factors. So not necessarily a future where everyone's implementing Strengthening Families, but a future where all families are strong and supported. But then we stepped back from that vision to say, what's the contribution of Strengthening Families to getting there? And what are the concrete things that we could do in the next 5 years to both get the protective factors approach out to more people where they need it, but also just to ensure that more families have those opportunities to build protective factors in whatever context that might be. So we generated a lot of ideas, and then we got into small groups and organized and prioritized those ideas and started to shape it into something that's starting to look like a strategic plan. Everyone who was at the meeting made individual action commitments. And actually, if you look in the handouts section of the webinar panel, you'll see there is an action commitment form. I put that there as a Word document in case you want to take it and type into it or think about it with your organization or your partners of what kind of commitments are we making to Strengthening Families going forward. That's something you can use for internal dialogue and for reflection. But if you want to fill it out and send it back to me, I'd love to see it. It's not a formal binding commitment, but it was really cool to see what people who were participating in the meeting on February 1st had to share about what they were committed to doing and how they felt what they were going to do was going to contribute to the overall vision that we're all trying to accomplish. So the strategic plan itself, you'll see another handout, well, 2 that you'd probably be interested in. One that is describes the core functions of Strengthening Families implementation. Some of you have seen that before. Some of you may not have seen it. It is sort of how we describe what needs to be going on in an agency or a program or a county or a city or a state or a country that's implementing Strengthening Families. These are core functions that need to happen in any kind of implementation. Some state leadership teams have found these core functions helpful as they get started, looking at who's doing what and how it all fits together. Other state leadership teams have used it kind of to reboot their activities if they're, you know, they've been meeting for a long time and they kind of need something new to revitalize what they're doing. They take a step back, look at these core functions, and figure out where they want to focus next. So we thought we would use that as our beginning framework, at least, for how we organize the strategic plan. I'm still open on whether that's going to stay that way, and you'll see at the end of the webinar today, that's one of the questions I want to ask is whether you think that framework is working. But it's a place to start anyway, and it does touch on, you know, the big picture things that we need to be doing in order to create opportunities for families to build their protective factors. The other thing that's in your handouts there is a PDF of the draft strategic plan, which you may want to open right now. We'll be going through it piece by piece on the slides, but you might prefer to look at it in another way, and you're welcome to do that. And that is a draft. You're welcome to share it with others who you want to give feedback, but please understand that it's not it's not a finished document. You'll be able to tell that when you start looking at it, but it is a starting point. So just high level, some of the themes that are emerging so far that you'll see popping up as we go through the specific core functions are that we want to have, we, the field, are looking for more information about community protective factors. Some that we've already been doing a lot of thinking about, which is sort of how does an entire community promote family protective factors, but then a separate question of what are the protective factors that make a community more resilient, a community more likely to nurture families and children and youth that are thriving. So that's a theme that's coming out. Race equity and social justice, which is a huge focus of CSSP's work, but hasn't been articulated a lot in the Strengthening Families materials. Not to say it's not there at all, but it needs to be stronger, and we need to both explore and talk more about how protective factors approach contributes to greater social justice. There's a lot of interest in having a Strengthening Families Summit again. I don't think anybody will be too surprised by that. I think we all want that to happen, and it's a matter of figuring out how. More information on the links between protective factors and ACEs, and sort of claiming a stake in that conversation about if we're going to have all these conversations about ACEs and trauma and toxic stress. And by ACEs, I'm referring to adverse childhood experiences for anyone who's not familiar with the lingo. But claiming some space in that conversation to really talk about prevention and about the role of protective factors in preventing and healing from those traumatic experiences. Another theme that came out was a need for communications and messaging support for everyone who's implementing Strengthening Families. Another theme was supporting integration into practice. So I think as a field, we've done a really good job of getting a lot of training out into the world for the professionals that we've been targeting in particular. And we need more of that. We need to reach other people with that training, but we also need to do more to push people from knowing and understanding the protective factors to really changing their practice. And the final theme I'll call out was the need for evaluation. Some of that is coming out as a result of the Family First Prevention Services Act. People wanting to be able to say Strengthening Families would qualify as an evidence-based practice for states to use funding from that Family First Prevention Services Act to support some protective factors focused activities. But in general, we also are aware that we need more evaluation and more support for evaluating sort of how people are implementing Strengthening Families in ways that will contribute to an overall knowledge and evidence base. So with those themes stated, I am going to go to the next slide, and I'm seeing a note that Martha said she's having a challenge opening up that Word document of the action commitment form. So we'll make sure that that gets uploaded with the when the recording and slides are put up on the on the Google site that the Alliance maintains. Lost my train of thought there for a second. Okay, so the next steps that we're going into with this process is to get input from a lot of people. And as I pointed out, we had started a draft. It's very drafty, but we have a survey up that you can use, and I'll actually click on it so you can see what it looks like, and then I'll be able to, I think, I'll be able to copy that URL right into the chat box for you. So if you want to open it up while we're talking, you can. But as you see, the draft is here. Ask for your email address, and once you put that in, you'll get into pages that go through each of the core functions. I'll get back to the slides here. On the survey, it asks you to, you don't need to rate every action area that's there, but you can check a box if you think something should be a priority. So that's going to be an indicator to us of which things a lot of people are agreeing should be a priority. So it's kind of a way to upvote something. You can check a box at something that you would want to be interested in, you want to be a part of, and that's not a commitment. I'm not going to follow up with everyone who checked that box for a particular action area. It is a reflection of interest And you might be checking that box saying, yeah, this is something I'm going to do in my state. And it doesn't have to be part of a bigger process. You're just going to take that and run with it, but we still want to know that that's something that's really interesting. You can also check a box saying you think something needs to be revised. And there, we're not looking for editing at this point. Like I said, it's still a draft. I'm aware there are some things that are, start with a verb and some start with a noun and things like that. But if there's something that you think substantively, oh, this doesn't include an audience that it should, or I don't think this is getting at what it means to, you can check that box, and then there's an open-ended comment box afterwards where you can write what revision you think should be there. And there you can also add anything that you think is missing. So, all that much ado before we get to the actual draft. So we're going to look at the draft action steps. You can be looking at the survey at the same time and fill it out, or I know some of this might take a little more thought. You might want to kind of absorb it during the webinar and then go to the survey afterwards. That link will be all over the place. It'll definitely be in the follow-up email that you get later this afternoon. And then while we're here in GoToWebinar, you can type in something you think is missing from a particular area that we're talking through. You can type a reaction to something. You can raise your hand in GoToWebinar, and I can unmute you if you're in a place where you don't have too much background noise and you can speak. And then at the end, we'll go through some big picture kind of reflection and reaction questions. So here we go, diving in. The first core function is building an infrastructure to advance and sustain the work. And we've got a few points here. Now, I don't want to literally read through all of these. I think that would bore us all. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to be looking at it and to say this is, and we've got it spread over 2 slides, so I'll leave these 4 up and then we'll go to the next. But this is about the leadership sort of functions, the national network itself. This is where I put the idea of holding a summit, although it was actually suggested under every core function at our meeting on February 1st, but also supporting state and local summits and finding out how we can help folks who want to organize something like that, maybe with some sample agendas and things like that. Funding is obviously a big issue, and that comes under this infrastructure question, both at the national level and for each of you in the way that you're doing your work. I assume everyone needs funding to make this work keep moving in a meaningful way, and so some of that might include looking more strategically across who is funding this work at the local and state level, and how can we leverage that to help others get similar funding, or to help get national funding to support things that are happening at other levels, and vice versa. The second piece of this, the second page, is about the communications and messaging capacity, which includes getting a more robust speakers bureau. Right now we have a list of people who, many of you are on it, who are willing to go out and speak about strengthening families, but we haven't done a lot active with that. Developing a readiness tool so that at whatever level people would be able to look at what they would need to have in place in order to implement strengthening families. And then aligning all of our materials and support for strengthening families and youth thrive, which is something that in states where both of those are happening, there's a lot of interest in better alignment between them, and we want to prioritize that at CSSP as well. So I'm going to take a breath. We're at the end of the first core function. I'm wondering if anyone has responses already. I haven't seen anything typed in, but I will leave a moment for you to type in if there's something you'd like to say. All right, we will keep moving. You can type in comments, just say which core function you're referring to, or you can be saving up your thoughts to put them into the survey format, which is also perfectly fine, but we'll keep moving here. The second core function is about building parent partnerships. So again, we've got a couple pages here, but some are about having more concrete tools that show the positive impact of shared power with parents. We have some tools that have been coming out from CSSP from our EC Link body of work that we want to promote and leverage. And we do have this subset about sharing power, and I think some of that leads to concrete action steps of having more parents as leaders and trainers in strengthening families implementation, making sure there's compensation for parents' time and expertise, and then nurturing and valuing authenticity, all of that comes under this share power concept, which we probably need to articulate more into some action steps. And the second page here for building parent partnerships is about doing more connection across the organizations that convene parent leadership groups. And what I've listed here are national groups, although there are also a lot of state and local level parent leadership groups. So what is the role there? What could be helpful for thinking about all of those groups? Connecting parent leadership work with youth leadership and engagement, and then exploring digital tools and strategies that would engage a lot of parents with a sort of social norm approach. I see that we have a comment from Margarita Medrano, who wrote, in Wyoming, Help Me Grow and Children's Trust Fund have partnered to implement strengthening families into community, family, and even health provider outreach. That's fantastic. Yeah, Help Me Grow has been a great partner. A lot of the affiliates are using strengthening families in different ways, and we may want to be more intentional about how we support that. So thank you for mentioning that. Okay. We get into the third one of deepening knowledge and understanding. And again, type in any comments you like as we go, and at the end we'll have some bigger picture conversations. I want to make sure that we cover all of this, but also knowing we'll get the nitty-gritty feedback on the survey. So within deepening knowledge and understanding, there's a lot about different audiences, making sure that we're reaching the right audiences, and ways that we can do that. Doing more about the relationship between protective factors and social justice and racial equity. I mentioned that at the beginning as one of the themes. This is one of the places it comes out the strongest, but we probably want to say more about that. Another one of those themes is sort of the what's next for adverse childhood experiences and all of the related work, and how we shift that conversation into prevention and healing. Then conducting a listening tour of parents to magnify parent voice about what's working in communities, and making decisions about what should happen next. Going to the next set for deepening knowledge and understanding. We've got aligning and coordinate among the various trainings that are available in the field. We've got great training resources out there from the Alliance of the Be Strong Families and the butterfly trainings that transform in Idaho. There are a lot of really great trainings, but it might not always be clear to people what functions the different trainings serve and how to choose which one for a given situation or audience. The idea came up of having strengthening families' professional competencies for a variety of different professions, expanding understanding of what resilience looks like in certain groups, working with the media to infuse protective factors approach into news coverage and pop culture. I think that's exciting to help the local reporter understand how to take a strength-based approach when reporting on issues around early childhood and families, but then also looking at where a lot of people watching movies about children and families or parenting, where a strength-based approach could be infused and get the message out to more people. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second to see if anyone had other thoughts. See, we've got a comment typed in. Eve Robinson, hi Eve, wrote in the importance of parent voice on the one hand, but the urgent need to ensure that professionals in the field are trained in the strengthening families approach. I agree. I don't think it's either or. I think they're both really important. And luckily, when we've got this idea of a collective plan, it's not that everyone needs to be working on everything, but that we can see both of those being very important and hopefully connecting in how we reach those two goals of parent voice and professional training. We've got Madison Gehring in Colorado cheering for connecting to social justice. Thanks, Madison. All right, glad we're getting some typing in. Thank you all. not just me on here. Glad to know. Okay, so getting into shifting practice, policies, and systems. One of the models, I mentioned this in the theme, when I talked about the themes, was about getting more towards integration. So one suggestion is to develop a coaching model so that programs and providers can move into action, and that could mean training and certifying coaches. It could mean putting out some models for how this could be done that would incorporate observation and feedback on practice. And I see Rigel typed in a comment right as I was saying that, so I'll read it off. Rigel Kraft writes, I love the idea of a coaching model. In Pennsylvania, we're thinking about putting together a toolkit of resources and thinking about how we provide technical assistance around moving from knowledge to action. Fantastic. And Tammy Sandoval also just wrote yes on that one. I think that will be popular. Right at this moment, there's an effort going on to build a national child development associate's degree to really build early childhood care and education as more of a profession. And so there was a suggestion that we make sure protective factors is incorporated into that so that people who are coming into the field are getting strengthening families content as a grounding in how to do their work. Connecting protective factors to social determinants of health work to reach more health providers and public health. Focusing on policies that affect family economic security and concrete support. Working with the built environment and urban planners to create conditions that will improve social connections and other protective factors in communities. And then a few different things about building power to support policy change. So looking at election cycles and who are the responsive policymakers, how can we build some coalitions around these issues, and reminding us always nothing about us without us. All of that could be applied to policy change at the state and national, federal level. The community protective factors, which I mentioned when I was talking about the themes. So community protective factors that support resilience of the community as well as the children and families. And then that parallel piece of how communities can create more opportunities for families to build family protective factors. Norms change work, making it okay to ask for help and valuing early childhood and all of that. And developing specific messaging for legislators and elected officials. Now, one thing that we have here in the fourth core function is about which specific sectors we'd want to target for practice change. So you see a list here of some of the fields that have come up. And sorry, I just saw somebody type something in and it's not getting there. Oh yeah, Karen Shanofsky typed in that we're working on normalizing home visiting. It's important to do that with strengthening family protective factors too. So yes, there's a lot of norms change we can do that will make families more receptive to the services that we want to be able to offer them so they can benefit from them. So these are some of the sectors that have come up. I'm sure it's not an exhaustive list. I realize that this actually doesn't include the sectors that we are already focusing on. So this doesn't say home visiting, early care and education, child welfare, family support. We probably should list those to be more inclusive, but this is the sort of new groups we could be reaching out to. So if you've got thoughts about other groups to add there or ways to reach these folks, that would be wonderful. And then we had a specific chunk of ideas around child welfare policy changes in particular. One being about building a vision of a child welfare system that's actually a child well-being system that's really about all community supports and not just the CPS system. We are excited that protective factors are actually listed by name in a draft captive reauthorization bill. We should know soon whether that makes it into the actual version of the bill, but that would be fantastic. CAPTA is, of course, the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act. It's up for reauthorization this year. And there's a lot of exciting news that could come out as we find out whether that's reauthorized or how it's reauthorized. But for right now, the fact that protective factors are listed by name, our our 5 protective factors. It's pretty exciting. Another thing under child welfare is to formalize and evaluate the protective factors approach that some child welfare jurisdictions are using. I mentioned this earlier, but it's, that's a good idea anyway, but it's also because with the Family First Prevention Services Act, there will be opportunities for increased funding for work that's preventing placement of children in foster care, and a lot of the protective factors work should be accomplishing that, so we'd love to see it able to be funded under that. There are other opportunities presented by that big Child Welfare System Reform Act that we should be looking at. Funding more professional services and concrete recommendations for practice and policy shifts so that more child welfare systems could make these kind of changes. We've got a couple of suggestions for, well, I'll just read each one. So Eve Robinson says, I would suggest including K-12 education as well. There's a larger focus on social emotional health in that realm as well. I'm serving on my local Board of Education. Way to go, Eve. That's great. Tell us what you can do to get protective factors in there, and we'll all be eager to learn. I do think there's a lot of interest in that, so K-12 is a good group to add. Karen Shinovsky types, help legislators see broad base of protective factors, not in addition to, but as a foundation for healthy communities, healthy families, and healthy communities. Yes, I like that a lot. And we will be recording all of these comments. Jim McKay shared a link to download the National Child Abuse Coalition recommendations for CAFTA reauthorization. Thank you. And I think there's a way I can make that visible to everyone. If I write thanks and send it to all. So you should be able to see that link now. All right, and we've got a comment from Margarita Medrano. Help Me Grow has 4 core components: community and family outreach, child health care provider outreach, centralized access point, data collection, and analysis. Help Me Grow Wyoming is a program partner with 211. Through this partnership, we have the opportunity to have a call center for families and providers to contact Help Me Grow for more information about strengthening families and ask for us to bring the Strengthening Families Framework training to providers and families. We've adapted the framework to be geared toward early childhood educators, healthcare providers, service providers, and families. 211 allows us to use their database to collect information. Setting up collection for protective factors, strengthening families data is something we're also looking at adding to the data collection. I'm really excited for this because it is data that moves people. Thank you, Margarita. That's great detail. And very glad to know that I don't think I was aware of what Wyoming was doing. It sounds like you're at the forefront of how Help Me Grow affiliates are implementing strengthening families. So that's exciting. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, to close the question box, if I can. Okay, so the last core function is about ensuring accountability. And so here we have that we may want to update or revisit the literature review. That's the basis for strengthening families. We did put out an update to that in 2014, the digging, what do we call it? Digging deeper, growing stronger. I always call it the big paper. That's not the official name of it. But it really goes through the research base for all of the work in the protective factors framework and the approach. But that's already 5 years old, so it may be time to update that. Writing up the story of strengthening families so far, standardizing a measurement tool to report their childhood protective factors, parallel to ACEs, and that is something that a lot of people, researchers, have been coming up with sets of questions. There are a few scales that have been tested more than the others, but we haven't really looked comprehensively at what those are. Increase the understanding and use of the tools that are available to measure protective factors, and make sure that people are using those and understanding the data that they get from them. Then we've got this idea about developing a research and evaluation infrastructure. So there's a few points there about what that could look like. I think that's exciting because there has been some really good evaluation going on. There are also a lot of people who want to be doing more with evaluation around their strengthening families work, but may just need some guidance or a nudge or support for how to do that. So hoping we can dig in on what that could look like. And then conducting evaluations of specific implementation strategies with a focus on what works for whom. That's how the thinking is going right now around precision home visiting, getting more specific that it's not just that a certain model is perfect and works for everyone. It's that the different models work for different people, have different strengths. But getting to active ingredients, supporting some rapid cycle evaluation, not necessarily large-scale evaluation, standardizing some of the proxy measures across evaluations, and then the potential for experimental or quasi-experimental studies to really do it the big, rigorous way. But there's a lot of different options within that list. Okay, so that's what's on our draft plan so far. And now we're working on honing it. So maybe people are typing in, please do, or raise your hand if you'd like to speak. I'll say a little bit here before we get into the discussion that we're interested in getting a lot of input from parent groups and professionals and partners. So please share the survey. You can just send it to people or forward the message that'll come out after this webinar to people who are invested in strengthening families. Obviously, not everyone who's implementing strengthening families is concerned about strategic planning. We don't expect that, but if you know other people who are really passionate about this or who are really good at strategic thinking, please share the survey with them. If you've got a group, whether that could be a parent group or a provider group or a professionals group or your Strengthening Families leadership team, if you would have a chance to talk through the draft with them and then give me the feedback either by putting it into the survey and just saying in the comment, like, this is the feedback from our group, or just emailing me and saying what the feedback was from the group. I would love that because I think a lot of rich ideas can come out of conversation as opposed to just sitting and looking at something on your screen by yourself. I also do have the focus group protocol that we used in Washington, D.C. For a parent focus group, and I'd be happy to share that with anyone else who wants to use it. That focus group protocol is really the big picture questions about where should strengthening families go, how should we reach more families, not specifically responding to this draft, but it would still be informative and a good conversation. So please feel free to let me know if you'd like to use that protocol, and I would share it with you. We've got a request for the focus group protocol. I will send that to you, Maureen. So with that, I want to say a little bit about how we're going to make this happen. CSSP will continue to play this role that we've had of being the backbone organization, maybe being a little bit more clear about that role with this collective strategic plan coming out, that we're looking for partners at all levels who can find opportunities either on their own or with us or with other partners to implement pieces of the plan. And then, of course, we will be seeking funding to implement parts and pieces of the plan, and we hope that others will have their ears perked up for opportunities that would allow us to explore one of the issue areas in the strategic plan where we could work together, or you could get the funding and we could cheer you on. But we are hoping to really get some more momentum and funding around new innovations for strengthening families going forward. A couple other people asked for the protocol, so I will get that to you after the webinar. Okay, so the big picture questions that I have that I'm curious about your answers are whether you think the core functions of implementation work for this, and if not, do you see another structure that we should use? And we're open to that. We wanted to start with, start with something we had, but it doesn't mean we have to stick with it. Too many things popping up with the questions on my screen. Another question is whether you see your work clearly reflected in the draft, and if not, what needs to be added. One thing that occurred to me as I was getting the slides ready for today was we don't have a lot in here about just continuing the ongoing good work that's happening out there, and we probably want the strategic plan to include that. So if there are places where you say, well, really we should include this thing that we're all already doing, please do so. And then if there are other things that you're doing in your work that you don't think others are doing but you think are important and should be in the strategic plan, please let me know because we do want this to be inclusive. And then also, this is more a curiosity question, but whether you can picture using or adapting the strategic plan for your own work. So is this something that your state leadership team might take on and say, well, here's our state strategic plan as a subset or spin-off of what's in this, or for your organization to say our focus within the strategic plan is these pieces, but to kind of adapt the full thing. So I'm curious about your answers to those questions. We've got about 10 minutes left. I'm seeing a lot of people would like the focus group protocol. So I will send it to the specific people who asked for it, but I also think I'll ask Martha and the Alliance to put this up with the handouts so that everyone can access it. So we've got a couple of responses to these questions. Tammy Sandoval writes yes, yes, and yes. Thank you. Concise and helpful. Rigel Kraft says, I think the core functions work well. Yes, I think this could definitely guide our work, and it reflects what we're doing in some of the directions we'd like to go. And Madison Goring asks, how many year strategic plan is this for? We've been thinking of it as a 5-year strategic plan. I'm not confident that everything we're going to include in it could be accomplished in 5 years, but I'd like to, I think that's a good time frame to set goals for. I'm hearing some typing, which might be from one of my fellow panelists or organizers. Thank you. So yes, we're considering it a 5-year plan. If people have feedback on that, though, very, very happy to hear it. Any other thoughts? Would anyone like to be unmuted to comment on anything? Okay, we've got a couple more comments typed in. They all just popped up at once. So Maria Doyle writes, exciting to see that the strategic plan echoes what we are thinking about in our own state regarding the direction we want to take strengthening families, eager to see the plan as it develops. Thanks, Maria. Glad to hear there's alignment there. And I hope you'll let us know what else you all have in mind. Margarita also says yes to all three. We've been working on putting strengthening families at the core of our work at Help Me Grow. Thank you. And Maureen Durning writes, I'm happy to talk to anyone about using our training manual, Strong, in their work. We'll be incorporating lessons into home visiting here in Idaho soon and many other uses. Thanks, Maureen. That's great. Very, very powerful tool, the Strong materials. I encourage folks to check those out. I got to be in Idaho last week where a group of trainers were talking about how they're using those tools. It was very exciting. Kim Keisha Nixon writes, is there a way to intentionally include the communities in the efforts to support families? Community centers, impromptu community town hall meetings. I think that's a great idea, Kim. I'd like to hear more. Sorry, Kim Keisha. I'd like to hear more about what you're picturing there. I think sort of town hall or community meetings are a great way to get you know, a lot of different residents or families' opinions on where to move something forward, and the cafe models are a great way to do that. Whether you did a parent cafe that's explicitly about protective factors, or did more of a community cafe model, organizing families around a particular topic of concern in the community, that's a really good way to include community members and build community at the same time. When people come together for those, they come out feeling a stronger sense of connection and building their social connections. Jim McKay typed in a question, what help would you like from us and our partners to take this plan to the next level and make it real? Well, the short answer is funding, but in more seriousness, I would say I think making sure that this plan really reflects the network. The strength of Strengthening Families has always been in how many people have seen themselves in it, seen a way to apply it in their work, and just rushed in doing that. But what we're trying to do in this next phase is harness that level of innovation and enthusiasm and commitment to the framework to be a little bit more intentional about it, and harness that into being able to make a bigger difference nationally. So really looking for engagement like today. I mean, I was very surprised that so many people registered for this webinar. I kind of thought it would be, you know, a few state leads who are really engaged, but I should have known. Everything we've ever done with Strengthening Families, there's been more people with a solid, exciting, committed level of interest than we anticipated, so I should have known that you would all be excited about this and want to be engaged in it. So I want to keep up that level of engagement, and you know, feel free to reach out to me about ways that where you've got a group you could ask about it. I think we are looking at trying to do some sort of informal conversation at the National Conference on Child Abuse and Neglect. So if you're at that conference, keep an eye out. I'll be sending a message out once we figure out what that is, but hopefully using some meeting space there to convene just a group to talk through this and keep kind of brainstorming and winnowing down from the brainstorm ideas into some really concrete things. All right, thank you for all the comments and questions. I'll put up our contact information at CSSP. Like I said, the immediate next steps are please fill out the survey and let us know where you've got feedback on different things. It's going to be a lot of information, but I think it's all going to be really, really valuable. So please take the time to go through that survey, share it with others who might be interested, you know, if you have a chance to convene a conversation about it. And I guess I didn't put an end date on this process, but I'd say in the next month, if you can have those conversations and fill out the survey. Not that we have a particular hard deadline on this, but just because I want to keep it moving and keep the momentum going. So we'll have that survey open for a few weeks to a month. Let me know if there's an April like meeting where you want to have a conversation about it. But I would hope that by NCAN, which is towards the end of April, we'll maybe have an updated draft based on the feedback that we've been getting so far and be able to share that. And then also at the end of that survey, there's a place you can say if you'd like to be involved for further feedback. So many people may just want to give a kind of one and done, share your impressions and move on. But if you want to be certain to get a follow-up email when we've got a new version, let me know, check that box, and we'll be in touch. So thanks, everyone. Oh, I see a question that just came up. Can we access the survey through CSSP's website? Not today, but soon. That information will be going up. But for now, keep an eye on your email because there will be a follow-up message from GoToWebinar that will have the link right to the survey in it, and then we'll get the information up on the website before too long. So thanks everyone for participating, and have a great rest of your day, and we will definitely be in touch. Thank you.